Hello students, like I said in the previous class, we will be touching on theories of public relations in this class. So there is an important question which can be raised by all of us, like how do we decide that our Facebook pages can be used for reaching out to the volunteers? Similarly, why do you think our audiences agree to donate money for a particular program which we have announced? Similarly, how can we be sure that our position will be picked up by the media? All such different questions are often, raised by many people, come to our minds, but we often forget that, there are various reasons for such activities or such thoughts to come to our mind. Like it is always said that for any action to happen, there has to be something what we call events, right? So, events and actions are often related to each other, and this will actually take us to something called theory, right? Now, a theory is considered to be a prediction, like how these events and actions are interrelated to each other. So, that will be a focus of our class, and we will be looking at various levels of theories which are utilized in public relations as a medium, as a profession, and anything else if we are talking about in the future course of our class, okay. So, one thing which you have to understand that no single theory can be considered as a wholesome for public relation. There are multiple theories. There are multiple theories which actually define the reasons for different kinds of activities which are taken up by public relations practitioners. So, we will start with the theories. So, the first theory which we will be talking about is theories of relationships. So, class, like I said, we will start with theories of relationships. Theories of relationship is divided into two parts. One is called the systems theory, and the second one is called situational theory. Now, coming to systems theory, it says that an organization is actually made up of interrelated parts, right? So, it's like when all the blocks are brought together, we have something called an organization, and an organization is actually divided into two parts known as internal section and the external section, which will, I don't get confused, we'll actually understand it better. Like if suppose we talk about an institution called as United PR Works, okay. So, there are different factors like I told you, both internal and the second one is external, okay. So, this United PR Works is actually made up of something called stakeholders. Now, this is an important term which this theory is actually giving. It basically means that, stakeholders involve people known as customers, media, community, financial institutions, government. So, all these are actually brought together and they have been given a term called stakeholders. Now, these stakeholders are actually the internal factors. So, we can write down here media. The second one, as I said, customers. The third one, like I said, community. Then financial institution. They are all brought together and as internal factors for an organization, and they are also known as the stakeholders, okay. Now, apart from all this, like I told you, there is something called external, and external forces actually playing around, which is known as which is basically known as the environment, okay, which is also known as the external factor, right? Now what this theory is saying is organizations are basically made up of something called recognizable boundaries, and they are all related to each other for some activity or the other. Like for example, if suppose United PR Works is actually developing a new product, it has to have a conversation with all these internal stakeholders and also utilize the use of the environment, that is also the external stakeholder. Then only they will be able to bring about some effective plan or strategy to bring this new product out. Okay, so they are all very interlinked and interconnected, and they are all there is an interdependence of activities of all these stakeholders with the environment. Okay, so when we talk about the word environment, environment is very necessary for these internal stakeholders. The reasons being the raw materials, and then the source of the employees and the people who are working for the organization. Similarly, when they produce their products and services, it has to reach out to the audiences. So that's how this whole of systems theory is actually interlinked to each other, and everyone is working together. Okay, so it's a very interconnected web of network which is playing around in systems theory. Now coming to situational theory. This theory is a little different from what you call systems theory, but it focuses on the important term, that is stakeholders. It only takes up this term from the previous theory, stakeholder. It says that it is a good start to use the concept of stakeholders as a way of describing relationships. So it is actually saying that this theory has been useful in giving the term stakeholder. Okay. However, it cannot be concluded that all the stakeholders will be actually communicating with the organization at the same particular time, right? So different problems or different situations, different reasons could occur by which one or the other stakeholder will be actually communicating to the organization. Like I said, United PR Works, which can be taken as an example for situational theory also. And then another important point which this theory states is that all these publics, their role is situational. That means according to the problem or opportunity or issue, the role of the stakeholder is termed important. So there are three important stages to it in this particular theory which you have to remember. The one is the problem recognition, here in particular what the stakeholder does is the stakeholder actually understands what is the problem or what is the opportunity, what is the issue which will actually trigger one of the internal stakeholder. Okay. The second is known as the constraint recognition. See, whenever any stakeholder is coming into action, there are a lot of hurdles which may actually come during their performance. So that this particular section looks at that, and the final is level of involvement. So this particular section talks about how much of a role any particular stakeholder will have in the problem which is being discussed. Okay. So for example, if there is a problem with the wages, okay, especially for the people who are working as they are the subpar employees. So their problems, they have problems with the wages which is given to them. So do you think all the stakeholders which are involved with the organization will be involved for this? No. So as the problem is recognized, all the particular level of employees, they will be understanding what are the constraints which are actually making them face the situation, and finally you could see that the level of involvement from those section of employees, and if there is a support from anybody else, That is also very situational. Okay, so I guess both these theories are understood to you. Both of them come under theories of relationships. Okay students, so now we will be looking at the second set of theories, which is known as theories of persuasion and social influence. To understand this set of theories, you have to understand the term persuasion. Now, what do you mean by the word persuasion? Persuasion is actually linked to four different other terms. The first one being awareness. Here, awareness basically means accepting information which is given to the public for the first time. Okay. The second term which is linked to persuasion is known as attitudes. Now, what do you mean by the term attitude? It means that it is a predisposition of a consumer or an audience whether to like the product or the service or dislike it. Okay. Now, coming to the third term, that is known as beliefs. Now, beliefs basically means that here you basically become an assessment maker, whether you should accept the information which is given to you as true or false. Okay. And the last is known as the behavior. Okay. Now, behavior basically talks about observable action which is taken up by the consumer or the audience which you are actually trying to persuade. Okay. So, now why this term is relevant in these set of theories is that we will be discussing various theories where we have stages how an information or a message is accepted by the audiences. Here I will give you an example of a bank. Like you go to a bank, the idea is to basically start an account. So, what you see over there is the PR officer actually gives you a seat, and then while they are discussing the new programs of the bank, they also give you a cup of coffee or something to eat. So, that is actually you never know. These are all ideas or activities to actually persuade you to start an account with the particular bank. So, you have to understand that many factors actually influence how a person is actually affected or persuaded for a particular action to be taken. So, here the persuasion can be from the side of the what you call the source, or it could be the message in itself can actually persuade you, and finally the receiver. Okay. Now, coming to the theories. Theories of persuasion and social influence actually talk about, we will be looking at three important theories here. Okay. The first one being the social exchange theory. Social exchange theory. Now, the interesting factor about this theory is that it follows the same economic metaphor, that is cost and benefit. Okay. Now, how this is related, I will tell you. Like every individual or what you call group of people, they choose strategies on the basis of rewards and cost which is affecting them, right? And to be frank, when you talk about the audience perception, you will understand that the lower the cost, the better, but the benefit should be high. So, that is what this theory is trying to say also, that the economic metaphor is actually the reason why people are persuaded. Okay. And like you have examples of get quick rich schemes. Okay. So, all these schemes which you actually see on television or any kind of mass media, what they do is they usually play around something called the economic metaphor of cost and benefit. Okay, so that is what this theory of social exchange theory is trying to project. Now coming to the second theory, that is known as the diffusion theory. Now this theory is a little complex because it talks about how basically people process information, and if a message is given to them or an information is given to them, it actually has to go through various stages to finally for the adoption of the idea or the message. Okay, so that is the main idea of this theory. Basically, there are different kinds of, like I told you, stages to it. The first stage being the awareness building stage. The second being the interest. The third being evaluation. The fourth being the trial. And the fifth being adoption. Okay. So all these 5 stages, when a person or an individual or a group of people, they come across all these 5 stages, then only they are ready to adopt an idea or a service. So basically what this awareness stage is trying to say is that, you know, you are exposed to a particular idea or a service. The second, basically, the idea is basically trying to arouse the audience. So that will be the arousing section, would be the interest making section. Now coming to third is evaluation. This section basically talks about whether an individual should accept this idea or not, right? Whether it is potentially useful for that particular customer. Coming to the fourth one, the interesting part of this fourth stage is that, you know, the trial, whenever a person wants to do a trial about a product or a service, they actually try it on another person or somebody else whom they are known to. So if it is, positive about it, there is positive about the product, then only the last stage comes in, that is adoption, final acceptance of a particular idea. So that is what this theory's diffusion theory of 5 stages is trying to say you. Okay, whether how a person or an individual could be persuaded to adopt an idea. Okay, the final theory which we'll be looking at is known as the social learning theory. As the name suggests, this theory is basically saying that we are actually learning from others. Okay, like it tries to explain that whenever you try to predict behavior, it is by looking at a way receiver processes information. Like suppose, if we look at the way mass media shows different kinds of behaviors, you can understand like the selfie culture. Like selfie culture is very predominant in this particular generation. Why do you think it has got this predominance, or why do you think it has become very popular among people? The reason being, you know, the mass media has projected it that it can be used as a photograph when so many people are there, but you can have everyone, all of them together in particular photograph. So that is a use of something called a selfie, right? But here in this particular theory, an important person has to be talked about. That is Albert Bandura, who is a social psychologist. Okay, and this person particularly says that we can learn new behavior merely by observing others. Okay, so like for example, you can see in most of the advertisements which are seen on, whether it is online or whether it is television, you know, the famous personalities or well-known people are actually practicing certain activities. So and why do you think they are actually asking them to come for the ad? The reason being, they are affecting people's minds, and people will be affected by their presence, and people will like to do what they are doing. So all this comes from social learning theory. Another important point this social psychologist is trying to say is that we try out in our minds any particular activity for a long while until we finally decide to use it or not. Okay, that means any particular behavior cannot be immediately taken up by an individual. It takes some time, it takes a while for them to actually accept that idea and think that yes, it will look good for me also. So this is one of the examples of social learning theory. So please do remember the social exchange theory, diffusion theory and social learning theory. All the three theories are different from one another. Now we'll go to the next section, that is known as theories of mass communication. So class, now the last set of theories which we'll be looking at is known as the theories of mass communication. Now when we talk about this set of theories, there are basically three theories which are linked to mass communication, which we are using for public relations. The first one being the uses and gratifications theory. The second one being the framing theory, and the third one is basically known as the agenda setting theory. Now all the three theories are different from each other, like I said. Now uses and gratifications theory, one important point which is talked about here is people are active users of media, which is what is projected by this theory. Okay, like if suppose I am talking about me myself, I may not necessarily be interested in reading a newspaper at 6 a.m. Maybe at that particular time I like to look at my Facebook page. Similarly, I am not a person who would like to see the news bulletin right in the morning. Maybe I am a person, I get free only at night and I would like to see that particular news bulletin at night. Okay, so in the sense I am an active user of media, but according to my use, according to my need, I will decide what is necessary for me at what particular time and what is the gratification I am getting from that particular media. Okay, so that is what is projected by this uses and gratifications theory. Similarly, it is also trying to say that people can be using media for different reasons. Like the first reason being, people can think media can be a source of entertainment. Maybe like they like to look at the mass media whenever they feel that they need some entertainment in their life. The second being, media can be used to scan the environment. Okay. Now what do you mean by that? It basically means that scanning of environment basically means you are actually looking for things which interest you as an individual. You are not looking for everything which is there under the universe, but only certain things which interest you as an individual. That is what is the second point. Similarly, the third point says that it is a diversion. Now many parents are saying that media is a diversion for their students or diversion for their children. Maybe or may not be. So this can be one of the things which can be why a person uses media or mass media. Okay. Now the fourth point, very interesting, as a substitute. It can be used as a substitute for personal relationships. Very important point, because right now a lot of discussion is actually going on about it. When we make a Facebook friend, or when we make a friend whom we are actually not known personally or we have not physically met that friend, but we actually accept the friend request, why do we do it? Okay, so that is again a point which is discussed by uses and gratifications theory. Like you uses as a use it as a substitute for personal relationships. And the last point which it is looking at is as a check on personal identity. Personal identity and values. Okay. So that means you look at the mass media to actually study what is your identity or what is the identity which is looked at, or what are the values which you should as an individual focus on. So all these could be reasons why people use media or mass media for the different reasons, and these can be the gratifications which they receive from it. Okay. So that is what we have to discuss on uses and gratifications. Now coming to an important theory that is known as the framing theory. Like the name suggests, what do you think of frames? Okay. Frames are basically, pre-existing set of meanings and or values which are carried by mass media or media. Okay. So here the media scholars are trying to suggest that the messages and information which are sent to the audiences carry with them a pre-existing set of meanings. Pre-existing set of meanings and beliefs. Okay. What do you mean by this particular thing? It basically means that, already the messages are designed in a way that they already know what will be taken out by the audience. They know this particular frame is inserted in the message because they know this particular idea will be directly accepted by the audiences in some or the other way. So they go with that particular idea while designing of the messages or the information. And another important factor here is these what you call pre-existing set of meanings and beliefs actually come from the society itself, or what you call cultural and social groupings in which we are actually living in. Okay. So they are not coming from outside, they are actually already there in our culture and social society and a society. That's why they are coming into the messages right away, so that they are easily accepted by the audiences in for whatever audiences are your messages designed for. Like if suppose we are actually talking about an online game, okay, which is developed for children. So basically what you will be looking at is all the young children are right now addicted to online kinds of tools or what you call softwares. So all these what you call intentional ideas or thoughts which can actually come to an audience's mind will be all inserted in that game. So that is again a part of what we call framing theory. That means frames are well designed in the messages or information, and the person who is actually designing the messages, they are already known of that. Okay. So like I said, the frames are defined as an active process of drawing out dominant themes from content. Okay. And these dominant themes come from cultural and social groupings where we actually live. Okay. Now coming to the third theory and the last theory, that is known as the agenda and this agenda setting theory. Now here this theory is very important, keeping in mind actually the idea came very long before than the actual what you call understanding of this theory. Like it was given by, this idea was given by Bernard Cohen, okay, in 1963. Okay. So you can understand the idea was long there, and he said one sentence, I'll just read out for you. Media can't tell people what to think, they are successful in telling what to think. Okay. Now this is what the sentence is trying to say, that it is the mass media is actually not telling people what to think, but it is successful. That means it has been successful in telling what to actually think about. But you have to understand this idea of agenda setting theory was taken up by three media scholars, okay, in the year 1968. Now almost a decade, right? So the three people, like I said, Maxwell, McCombs and Don. So all these three people basically understood this idea as very relevant, and they brought about the theory called the agenda setting theory. And they said this theory was basically used in the 1968 presidential election. Okay. So now why do you think it was used there? I'll tell you. It was basically what was said by these media scholars was that during the presidential campaign, the voters actually, for the voters or the voting people who were contesting in the campaign, they followed public opinion and media reports. So in the sense, they were already known of the fact what the people are actually thinking and what do they want, what are their needs and wants, and what is the mass media trying to report. So you can say that mass media actually did not change the voting behavior. The voting behavior was already affected by the mass media. So here when we talk about agenda settings theory's relation to public relations, you should understand that it is an attempt to influence media's agenda by providing news items for consumption. So that is an important point which sets agenda setting theory different from the other two theories. I hope all these theories were understood by you. And these theories are interesting individually when you read them, but these are all connected to the activities of public relations, which in itself is a wholesome process. So thank you class for actively listening. Thank you.